The morning sun had barely crept over the rooftops of Maple Grove Estates, painting the neat rows of identical houses in soft gold. It was the kind of neighborhood that prided itself on symmetry, perfect lawns, polished mailboxes, and not a trash can left out a minute too long. Birds chirped lazily, sprinklers hissed across manicured grass, and at the corner of Sycamore Lane, a group of kids waited for the yellow school bus that always arrived at 7:45 sharp. Liam Hayes stood a little apart from the group. At 10 years old, he was quiet, the kind of boy who said please and thank you, even when no one was listening. He wore a blue hoodie that looked a size too big, and his backpack was scuffed from years of use. He shifted from one foot to another, clutching his Spider-Man lunchbox, glancing down the road for any sign of the bus. Behind him, a row of hydrangeas lined the front yard of a pristine beige house. The grass was clipped to exact uniformity. Each blade looked as though it had been measured. It belonged to Karen McMillan, president of the Maple Grove Homeowners Association, unofficial neighborhood watchdog, and self-appointed enforcer of what she called community standards. From her kitchen window, Karen watched the children with a disapproving frown. She'd noticed one thing over the last few weeks. One of those kids, she couldn't remember his name, kept stepping a few inches onto her grass. Every morning, same spot, flattening her perfect green with his sneakers as if he owned it. She had emailed the HOA board twice, called the bus company once, and now, after yet another morning of disrespect, she decided she'd had enough. Karen snatched up her clipboard, straightened her cardigan, and marched out the door with the authority of someone about to change the world, or at least someone's morning. The click of her heels against the pavement made the children turn. Conversations about video games and weekend plans faded. Liam looked up just as she approached, her expression sharp and focused, like a hawk that had spotted prey. "Excuse me, young man," she said, pointing the tip of her pen at him as though it were a weapon. "Do you have any idea where you're standing?" Liam blinked, confused. The bus stop," Karen huffed, folding her arms. "No, you're standing on private property, my private property. This grass doesn't belong to the city. It belongs to me, and I've spent hours maintaining it. Do you think that's okay?" The other kids exchanged awkward glances. A few took a cautious step back, whispering among themselves. I'm sorry," Liam stammered. "This is where the bus picks us up. I didn't mean. I've sent 3 notices about this." Karen cut in, her voice rising. 3. To your parents, to the HOA, and even to the school. Yet here we are again. Rules exist for a reason, young man. This is how chaos starts, when people think they can do whatever they please. Liam's cheeks burned. He took a step back onto the sidewalk, clutching his lunchbox tightly against his chest. His eyes darted toward the approaching road, silently begging for the bus to appear. Behind Karen, a curtain shifted in one of the nearby houses. Mrs. Jenkins, the elderly neighbor, peered out, phone in hand. A few more neighbors paused on their porches, pretending to check their mail, but really just watching the scene unfold. Karen continued, undeterred by the growing audience. "I've worked hard to keep this neighborhood beautiful," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "It's people like you, careless, disrespectful, that ruin it for the rest of us." "I didn't mean to," Liam murmured, his voice trembling. "Well, intentions don't excuse bad behavior," she snapped. "Next time, stay off my lawn, or I'll have to report you again." The words hit like a slap. Liam swallowed hard and nodded. He wanted to cry but refused to let her see. The sound of a diesel engine broke the tension. The school bus was turning the corner, its brakes squealing slightly as it slowed. Relief washed over him, but it was mixed with humiliation. The other kids quietly moved toward the curb. No one said anything, but their silence was loud. The bus doors opened with a metallic hiss, and the driver gave Liam a sympathetic look. He'd seen Karen before, yelling about parking violations and mailbox heights. Liam climbed the steps without looking back. As he took his seat by the window, he caught sight of Karen standing there with her clipboard pressed against her chest, lips pursed in satisfaction. She thought she had just taught him a valuable lesson, but through the window, he also saw something else. Mrs. Jenkins, the neighbor, was holding up her phone, clearly recording. She gave Liam a small, reassuring nod before pretending to adjust her glasses. The bus rumbled away, leaving behind a faint cloud of exhaust and a silence that hung awkwardly in the morning air. Karen stood there a moment longer, brushing invisible dust from her skirt, feeling oddly proud of herself. She didn't notice the disapproving looks from a few parents who had come out of their houses. She didn't care that she'd just embarrassed a child. To her, she had upheld order, preserved the sanctity of Maple Grove Estates. As she turned to walk back to her house, she muttered under her breath, "If people just followed the rules, we'd have no problems." Inside the bus, Liam sat quietly by the window, staring out. The kids whispered around him, some defending him, others too afraid to get involved. He felt the heat in his cheeks start to fade, replaced by a growing pit in his stomach. It wasn't the first time an adult had scolded him, but something about the way she'd done it, so public, so unnecessary, made it sting. He thought of his mom and dad, how they always told him to respect adults, to stay polite, but he wondered if adults were always right. He wondered why someone would care more about grass than a kid just waiting for the bus. When the bus turned the corner and the houses disappeared from view, he let out a slow breath and looked down at his lunchbox. There was a small smudge on it, probably dirt from the lawn. He rubbed it off carefully, not wanting to give anyone else a reason to be upset. Back on Sycamore Lane, Karen returned to her house, satisfied that she'd once again brought discipline to her community. She didn't notice the faint buzz of her phone on the kitchen counter. A text from another board member, marked with a link. "You might want to check this. Someone posted a video from this morning." It's already getting views. But Karen didn't see it yet. She was too busy making herself a second cup of coffee, humming to the rhythm of self-righteousness, convinced that order had been restored. She had no idea that the boy she'd just scolded wasn't just any child, and she definitely didn't know who his mother was. The camera had caught every word, every gesture, every ounce of her indignation, and by the time the video made its way around the neighborhood Facebook group, it would be too late for her to take any of it back. The calm before the storm had begun. The HOA meeting room buzzed with the low murmur of small talk and the scraping of metal chairs against the tiled floor. It was the first Monday of the month, which meant one thing: Maple Grove Estates Homeowners Association meeting. The social event no one wanted to attend, but everyone felt obligated to. The walls were lined with framed photographs of perfectly trimmed lawns and neighborhood festivals, the kind that screamed community, but whispered control. At the center of the long oak table sat Karen McMillan, her posture straight, hands folded neatly over a stack of printed complaints. Her clipboard lay beside her like an extension of her personality. Her lips curved in a self-satisfied smile as she reviewed the latest agenda: parking violations, trash bin placement, fence paint shades, and, of course, the bus stop grass incident. In her mind, she had handled it perfectly. A simple correction, a lesson in respect. That video Mrs. Jenkins had posted online a few days ago. Exaggerated nonsense. A few negative comments on the HOA Facebook page meant nothing. People always overreacted. She had rules on her side. Around her, the board members shuffled papers and poured coffee from the carafe at the back of the room. The air smelled faintly of burnt beans and freshly printed documents. "All right, everyone," Karen said, tapping the table with her pen for attention. "Let's get started. As usual, I'll begin with the neighborhood maintenance report. Then we'll move on to..." The door opened. The sound was subtle but carried through the chatter, slicing it cleanly in half. Everyone turned. Standing in the doorway was Chief Rebecca Hayes. She wore her police uniform, crisp and immaculate, the dark navy fabric catching the fluorescent light. Her badge gleamed like a small sun pinned to her chest. She moved with quiet confidence, no hurry, no hesitation, just presence. Her gaze was calm but steady, the kind that could make an entire room straighten up without a single word. Karen blinked, thrown off for the first time all evening. "I'm sorry, ma'am," she said, forcing a polite smile. "These meetings are for residents only. You'll need to sign in and state your purpose." "I'm a resident," Rebecca said simply, her voice low and even. "I live on Birchwood Court." A ripple of surprise went through the room. A few people whispered Birchwood was at the far end of the neighborhood, the new section with larger homes. Karen tilted her head, studying her visitor. "Oh," she said with an awkward laugh, "well then, welcome. I don't think we've met before." Rebecca stepped closer, her boots clicking softly on the floor. "No, we haven't, but you met my son." Karen's smile faltered. "Your son, Liam Hayes." The room fell silent. The only sound was the faint hum of the ceiling fan and the distant barking of a dog outside. The name landed like a weight on the table, heavy and undeniable. Karen's fingers twitched. "Ah, yes, that matter." She forced another smile, this one brittle. "I simply reminded him of the property boundaries. Nothing personal, of course." Rebecca set a folded piece of paper on the table, a printed still from the video. Karen's face was frozen mid-lecture, her finger jabbing toward a small, frightened boy. The timestamp and location were clear. "Nothing personal," Rebecca repeated. Her tone didn't rise, but her words carried the quiet force of authority. "You confronted a 10-year-old child on city property over grass." Karen's face flushed pink. "That patch of land technically belongs to my parcel." "It doesn't," Rebecca said, cutting her off. She reached into her folder and placed another paper on the table. "A property map. That area is designated as a public right-of-way. It's maintained by the city, meaning—" She paused, letting her eyes meet Karen's. "You have no authority there." Someone in the back coughed to cover a laugh. Karen shot them a glare before turning back to Rebecca. "Well, I didn't know that," she said defensively. "But I was just trying to uphold the community rules. You can't expect me to memorize every zoning regulation." Rebecca's expression didn't change. "Maybe not, but you can be expected to treat children with basic respect. My son was humiliated in front of his peers because you decided your lawn mattered more than his dignity." Karen's jaw tightened. "I think you're overreacting, Chief. Kids these days are too sensitive. He'll be fine." The way she said chief wasn't respectful. It dripped with sarcasm. But Rebecca didn't flinch. She simply straightened her shoulders and stepped closer to the table. "I've been a police officer for over 15 years, she said quietly. "I've dealt with people shouting, fighting, breaking laws. But I've rarely seen anyone misuse power as calmly and confidently as you did in that video." A murmur of agreement spread through the room. Even a few board members nodded subtly. Karen looked around, suddenly realizing that the tide of the room had turned against her. "Now, wait a minute. This is completely inappropriate. You can't come in here and lecture me in front of my board." Rebecca leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping just enough to make everyone lean in. "You confronted my son. You made him afraid to go to his own bus stop. You made him feel small, and you didn't even have the facts right. That's not leadership. That's intimidation." Karen's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Let me make this very clear," Rebecca continued. "If you ever approach my child, or any child in this neighborhood again, over something that isn't your business, I will consider it harassment, and I'll handle it accordingly." The word harassment hung in the air, heavy and unmistakable. Everyone knew what it meant when spoken by someone wearing a badge. Karen's hands trembled slightly. She looked down at her clipboard, the symbol of her self-importance, and for once it didn't feel like a shield. It felt like evidence. I didn't mean to cause trouble," she said weakly. "I just thought." Rebecca straightened up. "That's the problem. You thought you were in charge. You thought enforcing your idea of order mattered more than kindness. She turned to the rest of the board. This community deserves better than that, and I'm sure you'll all consider that at your next election. There was a long silence. No one moved, even the air felt still. Finally, Karen exhaled shakily. I suppose I owe your son an apology. Rebecca gave a small, polite nod. You do, but make it to him, not me. She turned, her boots echoing on the tile as she walked to the door. Just before leaving, she looked back over her shoulder. And next time you want to enforce the law, she said evenly, make sure you actually know it. The door closed behind her. For several seconds, no one spoke. The only sound was the faint rustle of papers and the flickering hum of the overhead lights. Then, slowly, the whispers began quiet at first, then louder, spreading like ripples. Did you see her face? She had that coming. About time someone stood up to her. Karen sat frozen in her chair, staring at the door. Her cheeks burned, but her hands were ice cold. She could still hear the chief's voice echoing in her head, calm and unshakable. For the first time in years, she didn't feel powerful. She felt exposed. The clipboard lay flat on the table, the paper on top still showing the heading, Community Conduct Violation Bus Stop Area. She stared at it until the letters blurred. Outside, through the window, the evening sun was dipping low over the neighborhood. A few children rode their bikes down the street, laughing freely. Among them, she spotted Liam, the same boy she had scolded. He was smiling now, chatting with a friend, carefree. Karen looked away, and for the first time in a long while, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, she had been wrong.